This video is now in session, and Germany's federal election has taken a completely different tone than all of us expected it to be. So currently, Angela Merkel, who is the chancellor, is not going to run for re-election in Germany, which has created a very weird election cycle because there is no incumbent in Germany, there is no incumbent chancellor, and there is no party that is trying to defend their current leadership because Angela Merkel will no longer be chancellor. And at this point, she has been chancellor for around 16 years. So as to who will replace her, it's at this point a three-person race between Armin Laschet of the CDU, which Angela Merkel belongs to, Olaf Scholz of the SPD, and Annalena Baerbock of the Green Party. Now, originally, Armin Laschet was the favorite to win in this election. The CDU had a strong lead, but after questions of his character popped up about his relatability to Germany as a whole and Germans both in Bavaria and as well as the Rhineland, in addition to COVID cases and the environmental disasters we saw in the Rhineland, a lot of people are questioning whether Armin Laschet should actually be the leader of Germany, especially because he is more his character is somewhat similar to Michael Dukakis, which if history nerds remember, Michael Dukakis lost because he lacked emotion, because he lacked empathy for the general public, and that is essentially what Armin Laschet is repeating in this election. So based on Poland with the CDU-CSU party, they were originally in the lead, but then they fell because of the Green Party. The Green Party elected Annalena Baerbock as their leader, but then Annalena Baerbock herself faced some challenges, so then the CDU went back up. But the fact that they're back down shows you that a lot of Germans are just frustrated at this current political scene. They're frustrated that and they're also tired of the CDU and the CSU and as well as their leadership. So that is why they, at this point, have in the polls turned to someone else, to the SPD. The SPD has not been in power for a very long time. It's been more than around 2 decades at this point since the SPD were in power. Back in the 2002 election was the last time they won the Bundestag, and even then they only had a 3-seat majority between the SPD and the CDU/CSU. So, and that's just to note, 302 seats are needed for a majority. So they didn't even have a majority to get stuff done. And that led to the rise of the CDU and the CSU. But now the opposite is happening in 2021, where Armin Laschet, at this point, where a lot of Germans are getting frustrated at the incumbent party, and they're placing the blame of all of these problems on the incumbent party, which is the CDU. So that is why the SPD has risen in the polls. And there are people who at this point have called for Armin Laschet to resign as the leader of the CDU, to instead let the CSU leader, who is Marcus Söder, to lead the CDU-CSU coalition. Now, for some context, the CDU-CSU coalition is a coalition that covers the whole of Germany. The CSU covers Bavaria, which is in southeast Germany, and then the CDU covers everywhere else. And their party together creates the center-right faction, where they're culturally and economically center-right. And because they're a union, technically they're actually two parties, but they do have 2 leaders, for one for each party, and then all of them together elect one of those leaders or a completely different leader to lead the entire party. So Armin Laschet of the CDU ended out on top, but a lot of people want Marcus Söder to actually be the leader of the CDU-CSU coalition. If you see here, even without officially winning, Söder would be the strongest candidate. He would have a lead of 40% compared to all the other candidates of Scholz, Baerbock, and Laschet. Laschet currently, in this poll, has 12%. And then between Laschet and Söder, Soder wins a majority of the vote. 50% of CDU-CSU supporters are in favor of Soder in 2017 rather than Laschet. But nonetheless, Laschet was still elected as leader, and that is why Olaf Scholz of the SPD has risen. Now, for Olaf Scholz, he himself is somewhat similar to Bill Clinton, where he's economically conservative, but he's liberally, but in cultural and social values, he's a little bit more liberal, and as well as climate values, because climate change is part of this election. The SPD as a whole, though, is a center-left party. They're somewhat similar to the Democrats in the United States, at least the establishment Democrats, and not like the Blue Dog Democrats. Olaf Scholz, though, he could be described as more of a moderate Democrat if for American viewers. But Olaf Scholz, he has been the leader of this SPD since, or I guess he's been part of the SPD for a very long time. He's been in the leadership for an incredibly long time, and he has been vice chancellor since 2018. But this could potentially be his moment to become the chancellor of Germany, based on Poland. And the SPD, for a matter of fact, has not really actually led in a poll for 15 years. So the fact that the SPD has finally led indicates a sense of frustration by the general German public. And this isn't just reflected by just one poll. It's been multiple polls at this point that have shown that the SPD is ahead of the CDU and CSU coalition. You can see right here of these pollsters, you can see there's a tie here in this pollster, and then you can see there's another tie, a lead, a tie, lead, tie, and then a bunch of polls that have shown a lead for the SPD. If you see this YouGov poll right here, the SPD leads by 5 percentage points, and the Green Party is not that far behind from the SPD CSU party. Here you can see that at the very least the lead is 2%, and here the lead is a tie. So it creates a situation where the SPD has a very good chance of actually winning an election. And the thing with this is that if this lead happened a few months ago, then the CDU-CSU would have time to recover. But we're seeing, but this election is happening this month. It's happening later this month, September 26th. So there is very little time for the CDU-CSU to fully recover, and there's very little time I guess, decrease in time for Armin Laschet to figure out how to dig himself out of the hole that he has created for his party. So ultimately, we're seeing these circumstances happen, and it's creating for a very bad scenario for the CDU party, and we could see the SPD become the leading party of Germany, and that would signal a massive shift for Germany's politics. But I will note that Olaf Scholz is relatively he is relatively more conservative than the SPD as a whole. So for most Germans, if they feel like the SPD is socialist, ultimately Olaf Scholz is nowhere near that. And also, this is not an endorsement of any party, because we are not even I guess, qualified to give an endorsement, but we're just stating the political circumstances at hand with the CDU, CSU, the SPD, and the Green Party. Now, for those who have questions about the AFD, which the AFD, by the way, is a far-right party. They're more of an extremist party. For people who have questions about that, the AFD this year doesn't seem like they're going to have a incredibly strong presence. They haven't been able to effectively campaign as a populist or as an alternative candidate to all the establishment parties. And then in terms of the left and the FDP, none of them have really been able to stand out in this election. It's mainly a three-person race between the Black Party, the Red Party, and the Green Party, and some would even say it's really only just a two-person race between Armin Laschet and Olaf Scholz, but it is a very competitive one that we have not seen for several decades at this point. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.